Hey there, this is Ari. Welcome back to the Energy Blueprint podcast. With me now is Nathan Crane, who is an award-winning author, inspirational speaker, plant-based athlete, event producer, and 20 times award-winning documentary filmmaker. He's the founder of the Panacea Community, creator of the Global Cancer Symposium, host of the Conquering Cancer Summit, and director and producer of the documentary film Cancer, the Integrative Perspective. In 2005, at only 18 years old, he began his health, healing, and spiritual journey, eventually overcoming a decade of brutal teenage addiction, house arrest, jail, and challenging times of homelessness to become an international author, filmmaker, and speaker dedicated to health, healing, and conscious awakening. He's received numerous awards for his contribution to health, healing, and personal development, including the Accolade Film Competition 2020 Outstanding Achievement Humanitarian Award and the Outstanding Community Service Award from the California Senate for his work in education and empowerment with natural and integrated methods for healing cancer. With more than 15 years in the health and wellness field, he's reached millions of people around the world with his inspiring messages of hope, healing, and transformation. And his website is nathancrane.com. So welcome, Nathan. Such a pleasure to connect with you.
All right, thanks for having me, man. I'm a big fan of your work. I highly respect you as a teacher, as an educator, and I'm just really happy to be here on your podcast. Hopefully, share some good information with people.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate the kind words. So let's talk about, first of all, why cancer? How did you get into that specifically? What sparked your interest in that? Why did you start making films on the topic of cancer specifically?
Yeah, I went through it mentioned in my bio a little bit. I went through some really challenging times as a kid. As a teenager, ended up homeless, addicted. Going through addiction, going through in and out of jail. Really didn't think. Nobody thought I was going to make it to 18 years old. Very unhealthy diet, very unhealthy lifestyle. Smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, drinking alcohol, eating fast food, on antibiotics all the time because I was sick all the time. You name it, right? I was on course for a cancer diagnosis or an early death in the grave. And at 18 years old, I had this kind of epiphany, this awakening moment, and I left everything behind, and I started my life over in San Diego, California. And from that moment forward, I started getting really dedicated to health and nutrition and exercise, and I started meditating hours and hours a day, and started getting really serious about, okay, I know what it's like to be really unhealthy. I know what it's like to be sick all the time, to have poor sleep habits, to have no energy, to have mental fatigue, to have all these issues, gut issues and health issues, all kinds of challenges going on. But I didn't know what it was like the other end of that extreme, to have energy and clarity and vitality and feel good and contribute to society. And so I just got really interested in that. I got really interested in what life could potentially be like on the other side of dis-ease, if you will, right? And so, I started diving into, interviewing experts and reading every book I could find and meditating hours a day and studying from, monks and spiritual masters and Zen masters and, going to the Buddhist temple every weekend and just absorbing as much as I could. And along the way, I started getting invited to speak, right? So I was speaking at events around the country. I designed my own cleanse. I spent 2 years designing a cleanse because I was going through all kinds of fasting and detox and cleanse protocols. I was experimenting as I would learn something, which I encourage people to do today. I work with thousands of people with cancer around the world, and I encourage, as you learn these things, become your own laboratory, as I've become my own laboratory. But you got to make sure you're learning the right information from the right people if you're going to experiment on yourself. But I just, anything that sounded good, I would dive in, I'd experiment with it, I'd get my own experience, I'd fumble, I'd learn, I'd grow, right? I wrote my own cleanse. I spent 2 years designing that. And so I'm 7 years into this journey, 25 years old, I think at the time. And I thought I knew a lot, right? I thought I knew everything. And I realized pretty quickly that I didn't know much at all. And my grandfather was diagnosed with cancer. And so I went to visit him in Arizona. And, I sat there feeling helpless and hopeless. And like I knew there had to be solutions for him. He was going through chemotherapy and radiation, traditional conventional cancer treatment. And he was so sick. He was in so much pain. He had lost his hair from the chemo. He was talking about how painful it was just to walk to the bathroom, and that's kind of my last memory of him, seeing him there in so much pain and feeling like I know there has to be solutions. I don't know anything about cancer, but not really knowing what to say, right? I was afraid of it like most people are afraid of cancer. And I went back home to San Diego at that time, and then he passed away shortly after in 2013. And from that moment forward, I just became obsessed with learning everything I could about cancer. So I started producing one of the first online summits ever about cancer and video series. I started producing conferences, interviewing world-leading experts and neuroscientists and holistic medical doctors and cancer survivors, cancer conquerors, cancer thrivers. Published a magazine, started working on this documentary that became just a labor of love that has since won 20 awards and is now available for people to watch, and just have learned everything I possibly could for a couple of reasons. One, I think part of it was if I ever had cancer, or my family or anybody I know ever gets cancer diagnosis, that I would know what to do, wouldn't be afraid of it. I could help them or help myself or help others. And two, as I learned more and more about it, I realized, look, we as a society don't know anything about it, right? We live in fear because of lack of information or misinformation about it, and simply just not understanding what it is, what causes it, and what we can do about it. And as I learned more and more about it, I realized, oh my God, there's so much here that everybody needs to know. Because once you understand what it actually is, what are the proven causes of it, and what you can actually do to help your body prevent or reverse it, naturally, holistically, non-toxically, or even using integrative medicine, you don't really have to be afraid of it any longer. And we really can do something about stopping this insane cancer pandemic that we're seeing today. I mean, we're at 10 million people a year around the globe dying from cancer and its treatments, right? And 100 years ago, that number was less than 1%. 50 years ago, that number was 10%. Today, we are at almost 50% of people being diagnosed with cancer. So there's clearly, correlation as well as causation that we know that contributes to cancer, and there are solutions for helping prevent and reverse it. It's a primarily preventable lifestyle disease. It's a metabolic disease, right? And we could talk about, what that is biologically. We could talk about, different factors that can actually empower people to take back control of their health. But to answer your question, that's really what's made me just so passionate about it the last 8 years.
Gotcha. So one thing you just said that I think is really important context for this discussion is the massively increasing prevalence of cancer over the last several decades. We've gone from, what were the exact statistics? Something like 1 million, how many years ago?
Yeah, well, if we go back to 1905, which we didn't have adequate testing then, so these numbers you can't say are 100% accurate, but in 1905, we were diagnosing cancer about 0.05% of the time. Less than 1% of people were being diagnosed with cancer. You jump to 1950, and that number was at 10%, right? Diagnosing got better, a lot more people were, there was testing, better testing, all of that, but still, it was only at 10%. Right. And so now, and basically
And that's
every
that's
year
you're saying 10% of the overall population will eventually get cancer
in
in that
1950.
in
Yep.
1950. Okay, and
Yep.
how do those numbers play out over the decades since then?
Now we're at 33% of women in Western civilizations, right? Mostly Europe, United States, mostly, modern technologically advanced civilizations. The civilizations that we think should have all the solutions for cancer through our technology and our pharmacological approaches and our surgery and radiation, right? Those are the societies that have the worst cases of cancer, 33% of women and nearly 50% of men. And they're projecting those numbers. If we don't change the causes of cancer, we don't change our lifestyles that are literally causing cancer. I mean, the statistics today are very clear. There's no debate about this. 90% of cancer is diet, lifestyle, and environmentally related, right?
Well, I agree with you that there's no debate on it. But what's interesting is there are people who do debate it, and we have a mainstream narrative uh, within conventional medicine that largely ignores the role of nutrition and lifestyle, largely doesn't address nutrition and lifestyle at all in treatment of cancer, and where the physicians themselves receive virtually no or actually no education in nutrition or lifestyle in their medical education. So
Yeah.
there's like a combination of profound ignorance around all factors related to nutrition and lifestyle and the role they play in disease development or cancer development specifically, combined with um, a cultural zeitgeist within the medical community, the conventional medical community, that is largely focused on genes and, do you have the breast cancer gene or the obesity gene or the whatever gene, um, where they're massively overblowing the importance of those genes that give increased susceptibility to those conditions, combined with an evidence-based medical paradigm that is massively corrupted and influenced by pharmaceutical companies, which have absolutely zero interest in nutrition and lifestyle. And not only that, but they have an active interest in suppressing that information so that they can promote pharmaceutical cures.
Right.
Um, so all of that creates this gap in the landscape between, okay, here's the actual science as you're describing it, like showing that it's clearly not genetics that are changing over the last 70 years that are causing this massive increase in cancer, it's lifestyle. And yet within the conventional medical community, they're almost entirely ignoring the role of nutrition and lifestyle. So
Right. Yeah, I have to add there that, because our conventional oncologists don't know this information doesn't mean this information exists, right? As you said, it's, unfortunately our medical doctors today, they are not trained in nutrition. They're not trained in lifestyle behaviors, right? They're not trained in, their oncologists are trained in primarily three things: pharmacology, right? Radiation, surgery. Yeah. Most of them, when I've interviewed medical doctors out of medical school and I ask them, how much training do you have in nutrition for prevention or reversal, right? Or even adjunctive therapies. Most of them have 4, maybe 8 hours of nutritional training in all of their schooling. Now it's very different if you go and talk to a holistic medical doctor, or if you go and talk to a functional medical doctors trained in functional medicine, right? Or if you go and talk to an integrative medical doctor, many of them will have years of not only schooling but beyond schooling, right, where they are looking at this science, they're looking at this data, they're looking at the impact of food and nutrition on cancer. I mean, we've had this science for decades. T. Colin Campbell did a study 30 plus years ago on mice, right, where he took mice that he wanted to look at the role of animal protein on cancer. Right, this is a mice model, but it still gives us some interesting insight, right? Where they increase that, so they expose the mice to a very strong carcinogen, and then all they did was increase protein, animal protein, primarily from dairy, to 20%, and every 100% of those mice had cancer. They became diagnosed with cancer. He took the second group of mice and he gave them 5% or less of animal protein and exposed them to the same carcinogen, and 0% were diagnosed with cancer. And he played with those numbers. He played it with plant protein, which didn't have the same effect. It actually didn't cause cancer, right? He looked at, okay, if they're diagnosed with cancer and then we remove that 20% animal protein and drop it down to 5% or less, what happens? And majority of those mice, actually the cancer goes away. So, we've had, and this is one study among, hundreds, if not thousands, that I've seen, and many, in the functional and integrative medical field have seen over the years, showing that nutrition alone has I mean, that's just protein, right? That's just one particular macronutrient out of thousands of micronutrients that are in the foods that we eat. And so, this science is there. The problem is our mainstream medical community is not exposed to it because, as you said, it's a corrupted system. The schooling that they receive is highly funded by pharmaceutical companies that are trying to find that one magical cure, that one magical drug that they can make $1 trillion off of, that this is a cure for breast cancer, this is a cure for this cancer, that one. And in my personal opinion, we will never see that. We haven't seen it yet after decades and billions of dollars of research, and I don't think we ever will, because the body is way too complex for one drug to affect one metabolic pathway to say this is going to get rid of your cancer, because there are thousands of things, millions of things happening in your body every second that are either contributing to that cancer diagnosis or contributing to your body doing what it's designed to do, which is be healthy and whole and heal itself.
Yeah. Well, to that point, there's a stat I came across recently talking about in all of the history of pharmaceutical development, with all of the thousands or maybe tens of thousands of medications that have been invented over the last maybe 100 years or close to that, 97% of them are non-curative. So only 3% of them are curative, largely things like antibiotics curing infections and things of that nature. To the point that you're making with T. Colin Campbell's work, I know that that's extremely controversial, especially because it was a mouse model. And I know that, lots of, well-educated omnivores definitely object to that research. But without diving into much of a digression on that particular topic, I know you've interviewed many, many dozens of cancer experts over the years for filmmaking. What is your sort of, I guess, overarching, your big takeaways from all the people that you've interviewed as far as the causes of cancer? What are the big picture factors? And I guess there's two levels that you could potentially answer this question. One would be like a physiological level in terms of mechanisms. And the other one is, what are the factors, the environmental, the lifestyle, nutritional factors that are influencing those mechanisms?
Yeah, you brought up a good point first about the, pharmacological approach, that there's just not a lot of hope there when it comes to treating chronic diseases like cancer. Now, there is some room for it. I'm not saying, look, avoid conventional doctors completely. That's why my film is called The Integrative Perspective, because I'm about, look, if there's modern medicine, if there's Eastern medicine, if there's ancient, indigenous, holistic, functional, if there's forms of medicine that are working, that are showing promise, that people are saying, look, I did this, even if they're anecdotal case studies. I had stage 4 cancer. I did this and this and this and this, and now I don't have cancer anymore. Those are the people I've been very interested in interviewing them and learning their stories. And along the way, you start to find commonalities, right? You start to find commonalities. And then, you interview the doctors and you interview the medical experts, you interview the neuroscience researchers, you interviewed the naturopaths, and again, commonalities. Then you go and look at the research and the data, and of course you can skew data, and, not all data is accurate, and you could find data that supports, and the reason for that alone is because we look at single mechanisms or single molecules. And when you look at a single molecule like protein, or you look at a single, or macronutrient like protein, you look at a single molecule like sulforaphane. It's like, oh yeah, sulforaphane has tons of studies, right, showing that it has anti-cancer properties and anti-inflammatory properties and all this. Well, you could also find studies that show it could be damaging to the body, that it creates an oxidative stress. But we know oxidative stresses in low amounts actually create an antioxidant response in the body. The problem is we look at individual molecules and nutrients and phytonutrients and things like that, not in their whole form, specifically not in their whole plant form. And that's a major cause for concern and causes a major problem, because all these different things have synergistic values together that we just don't fully understand in the scientific community. But when you interview hundreds of people and you see foundational principles that they all followed, and they don't have cancer anymore, someone like me, it's like, well, yeah, I can't deny that. How can I tell that person, that what they did didn't work? They're obviously cancer free, right? So going back to a statistic, I think that I've learned along the way that's really important for people to understand. I mean, one of our most prescribed conventional treatments today is chemotherapy. And the largest study that's ever been done on chemotherapy across 160,000 people from Australia and the United States, of 22 major adult malignancies, right? Look at just about every major cancer on the planet. When you grouped it all together, it had a 2.5%, less than 2.5% average success rate, meaning that people were able to stay cancer free become cancer free and then stay cancer free 5 years or longer.
And
Two and a half percent
that's for
success rate.
that's for all cancers combined or specific?
That's all adult malignancies, 22 major cancers combined.
Mhm.
And so that means a 97.5% failure rate with chemotherapy, right? That's a huge failure rate when you want to look at it. Now, of course, there are some cancers that did better. Testicular cancer had 50% success rate. Some cancers have 10 or 20%, but some cancers have 0% success rate with chemotherapy, right? So when you group it all together, 2.5% success rate. We can do better than that. That's my point,
Yeah.
right?
I remember reading that research when it came out, and this was I believe that's like at least maybe 7 or 10 years old, if I remember correctly. I remember reading it many years
Yeah.
ago. Um, and I do remember that there was some kind of rebuttal from the conventional, cancer doctors where they were trying to, maybe you know this better than I do, but they were trying to claim that, those statistics were misleading for one reason or another, and the actual success rate is higher. Are you aware of what their rebuttal to that would be, or why they still so strongly endorse chemotherapy?
Um, One of the potential rebuttals I've looked into slightly is like, okay, what is chemotherapy? Uh, what's its success rate when you combine it with surgery? What's its success rate when you combine it with radiation? What's its success rate by itself? And so those change statistics, right? And so that's one thing is like, well, look, if you have breast cancer and you have a tumor and it's a stage one, hey, look, maybe surgery is what you need. Maybe we go in and remove that tumor and then, we use some integrative approaches, or maybe it's a little bit of chemotherapy. And you can have higher success rates with certain cancer with conventional treatments. That's why I'm saying, like, I'm not against conventional treatment. I'm saying, look, find out what the success rate is on your type of cancer, your stage of cancer with those conventional treatments. And most of the time, unfortunately, when I have cancer patients ask their oncologists don't actually know. And so give them time to go back and look at the literature, or you go find out for yourself, right? And find out what it is. If it's a 70% chance and you're like, well, yeah, I got 70% chance. That's pretty high, 7 out of 10. I'm willing to take that. Then go for it, right? But if it's a 5% chance or 10% chance, or even 50% chance, you're flipping a coin at 50-50, right? And so figure out what it is for your particular type of cancer. And what you have to look at there is what treatment protocol and the length of treatment. So there's a lot of debate there because of, do you do chemotherapy for 32 sessions? Is it 12 months? Is it 18 months? Is it surgery, then chemo, and some radiation? We do know, there's no debate, that chemotherapy destroys the immune system, right? We do know that it causes DNA damage. We do know that chemotherapy and radiation actually cause cancer. And the medical industry knows this. The scientific community knows this. So there are side effects of treatments for cancer that actually cause cancer. So those are things, because we know, I know your work is incredible on, the mitochondrial health and so forth. We know chemotherapy and radiation, for example, can damage mitochondrial DNA. We know that it can damage, healthy cells' DNA, and that it can actually cause a chronic fermentative state for that healthy cell to turn into a chronically fermenting cell and become a cancer cell, right? So those are things you have to take into consideration as you're educating yourself about what is the best approach for the cancer that I'm dealing with.
Yeah. There's no question that fatigue is a major side effect of chemotherapy as a general rule. So let's get back to this question of causes of cancer. How would you frame, what is your take on the primary causes of most types of cancer?
Yeah, so Dr. Sunil Pai, who's become a good friend and colleague of mine, he's a medical doctor who is also, trained in Ayurvedic medicine and functional medicine and all forms of holistic medicine, diet, nutrition. One of the most brilliant guys that I know, among many that I work with over the years. He said it so clearly, probably better than anyone I've ever heard, to really break down into 6 fundamental categories of what we know today, what the science tells us today that directly causes cancer, right? And each one of these are 6 categories. I go through them quickly, and then maybe we could talk about a couple of them, right? But basically, we know chronic inflammation causes cancer. It's not only the underlying mechanism or the underlying association or symptom that we see with just about every major metabolic disease on the planet. We actually know the process of why chronic inflammation leads to cancer. And we don't have to get into the science of that, but we know chronic inflammation causes cancer. We also know that elevated blood glucose can cause cancer, right? Somebody who has just massive amounts of sugar in their diet on an ongoing basis. It's not that you can't really say sugar causes cancer, but we know, I mean, it's pretty clear that people who have elevated blood glucose on a consistent basis, primarily from simple carbohydrates and processed sugars over years and years, we know that most sugar feeds on cancer. Right? I mean, most cancer feeds on sugar. We know that's, glucose is one of cancer's main pathways to thrive on. We know that cancer can also switch to ketones. A lot of people don't know that as they're promoting a ketogenic diet. There are some benefits to certain modified ketogenic diets for cancer that we've seen in a lot of case studies. But we also know cancer can switch energy sources. So even though glucose or let's say sugar is really its main fuel source, even if you switch to other types of diets, for example, ketogenic diet, actually there are cancers that thrive on ketones. So you have to be a little bit mindful of that. We know that environmental toxins cause cancer. We know that there are a lot of probable carcinogens and known carcinogens. That is in our lotions and creams and shampoos and soaps and deodorants that are literally known carcinogens. Carcinogen meaning this is a known cause of cancer. We know that they're in our water and in our food and in our products, our beauty care products. And we can talk about why that is, and then what you can do to actually mitigate these toxins. So there's a lot of environmental toxins that lead to cancer. We know that stress has a strong, causative or correlative effect on cancer becoming diagnosed in the body. And we could talk about some of the mechanisms for that as well. But stress, anxiety, fear, basically, a chronic low-grade sympathetic response in the body, an adrenal response, basically downregulates your immune system. And without a healthy, fully functioning immune system, you can't fight off cancer, right? You need a strong, healthy, functioning immune system for your body to recognize, identify, kill, and remove cancer cells, which is one of the many things that our immune system and our lymphatic system does, right? Unhealthy diet. We know that there are foods that, there's some controversy here for sure, like anything, but we do know that there are foods that directly correlate, and even some that are known carcinogens for cancer. Processed meat is a known carcinogen for cancer, right? We know that it can cause cancer. We know that diets, high in processed foods, high in processed sugar, low in whole foods, low in plant foods, we know that there's a direct correlation between these diets and all-cause mortality, including cancer. And we also know that number 6 is lifestyle behaviors. And lifestyle behaviors, there's a lot in there, right? There's the common ones we know clearly: smoking, cigarettes, drinking alcohol. We know these things can cause cancer. But there's other things like sedentarism, right? Where people just aren't moving their body enough. I mean, you're in Costa Rica, right? You're there where one of the oldest groups of people live, 90s and 100s. And we know that, people who live to old age, primarily healthy, generally move a lot. They move their bodies a lot. Not necessarily going to the gym every day, but walking and moving and flushing the lymphatic system. There's a lot of reasons why moving. So there's other lifestyle behaviors of, there's one that I talk to people a lot about is turning on the news every single morning and feeling your nervous system with fear and anxiety and stress and cortisol, which downregulates your immune system, basically upregulates your adrenal response and lowers your ability to get rid of cancer cells. So, there's simple things we can do, lifestyle behaviors that can contribute to our bodies doing what they're designed to do, which is heal and repair and rejuvenate.
Excellent. So a lot of this, I mean, when you talk about those causes, the truth is pretty much all of those same causes are also responsible for the epidemics of obesity and diabetes, neurological disease and heart disease, and a long list of other of diseases that are the major killers in the Western world.
Right.
It really comes back to the same blueprint, um, that as far as how to live your life, how to eat, what kind of environment to be in, what kind of lifestyle to cultivate. Um, Having said that, within cancer specifically, it gets a little controversial. Like, let's say, in contrast, we look at something like obesity or diabetes. It is very well known, well established, and not really even debatable that you can take somebody who's obese or diabetic, type 2 diabetes, and change their nutrition and lifestyle and reverse obesity or diabetes literally within a matter of weeks. In the case of type 2 diabetes, there are studies that show complete reversal of type 2 diabetes within a few weeks to a few months of changing nutrition and lifestyle habits. Now, when we talk about cancer, even though it is the case, the majority of cancer is driven by nutrition and lifestyle, it is unlike diabetes. It is quite controversial to claim that just changing nutrition and lifestyle can reverse cancer. And a lot of people, conventional minded people, see that view as being very dangerous, as being, quackery, and really we need chemo, we need radiation, surgery, drugs, and I think the story is, from what I've seen, very complex, because I've seen cases where there are certain cancer treatments. Immunotherapy is a good example of this, or just surgical removal of cancers has been successful, and somebody's been cured by that, and they're cancer free. And I've also seen a lot of horrendous stories of people who seek out treatment, get chemo, and just go have a miserable experience and then die anyway. Um, so what is your take, I guess, on the first part of that, which is the potential for a natural approach, let's call it, nutrition and lifestyle change to cure or reverse cancer? And what do you see that as being a central player, or more of a supplementary approach to conventional approaches?
Yeah, it's a great question. And certainly our science is lacking here, right? And there are some exciting new uh, research studies coming out, and probably in the next few years, that some teams are working on, of this exact conversation of, let's look at, let's follow people who actually follow this exact diet and lifestyle parameters, who have cancer, and let's see what happens, and let's track them over time. So we don't have a lot of that science yet. What we have is a science that says, oh, sulforaphane from cruciferous vegetables helps with cancer. And we have this 30 plus year meta-analysis on people who ate mushrooms twice a day, or who ate 18 grams of mushrooms, which is about 2 mushrooms per day, versus people who ate 0 mushrooms per day. And the people who ate 2 mushrooms per day had 45% less cancer risk across 27 different studies and different types of studies, and different, 18,000 people that they looked at this major meta-analysis. We have a lot of that kind of science, right? Plants and their individual constituents and components that can, help reverse, that literally create apoptosis and literally produce NK killer cells in the body, and literally help reduce inflammation and cause an antioxidant effect in the body and kill cancer cells. Like, we have a lot of that individual science. It gives us a picture. It gives us a big picture to kind of think, well, okay, yeah, if this and this and this and this and this and exercise, stimulates the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is crucial for removing cancer cells from the body. We know that mushrooms, and we know that cruciferous vegetables, we know berries are anti-cancer properties. We know, okay, well, it's kind of common sense for me to go, okay, well, we do all those things together, we're probably going to get some pretty good results. Now, and then avoid the things that we know cause cancer: processed meats, and high amounts of dairy, and sedentarism, and chronic exposure to toxins. Okay, let's avoid those. Let's do the things that give us the most anti-cancer protective properties. And we're pretty well on our way to understanding, the closer we are to nature. This is what I get out of it. You said, what's the big picture? The big picture to me is the closer we live to nature, to our natural connection to the natural world, away from the processed, manufactured, highly additive, highly sugarized and processed fats and so forth, and live as close to nature, natural food, natural life, bare feet on the ground, fresh, breathing fresh air, getting the sunlight to help create vitamin D in the body. This natural way of living is going to really give us our best chances at living not only a long and healthy life, but a cancer-free and disease-free life, right? So there, that's the exciting part. Is the science will eventually catch up, and my theory is it will prove all of these things that we're talking about. We're not there yet, but what we do have is a lot of case studies and a lot of anecdotal feedback from people who had stage 4 cancer. Elaine Gibson, great example, right? She was diagnosed stage 4 cancer in her late 60s. Doctor said, sorry, you're never going to see your grandchildren grow up. What a horrible thing to be told. And she thankfully didn't accept that fake expiration date, as I call it. She didn't accept that prognosis. She went to town doing everything she possibly could. She got into a highly raw food diet, highly plant diverse, nutritious diet, lots of green vegetable juices every single day, exercising, started meditating an hour every morning, hour every night, making all these lifestyle. So got air purifiers, cleaned her air. She got water purifiers, cleaned her water. She started eating only organic. All these principles that, as you said, we know can contribute to eliminating diabetes, type 2 diabetes in the body, autoimmune disease, and gut and health issues, and all kinds of problems, right? Obesity, and a few years later, cancer-free, 75 years old now, more energy, more vitality, healthier than she's been in probably 20 years, right? And then you have Dr. Veronique Dessanier, very similar story, very similar process, very similar steps she took, cancer-free. You have Chris Wark, very younger guy, right? So these are, someone in their 50s and 60s, someone in their 60s and 70s. You have someone who is in their 20s and 30s, a male, right? Same thing, same process, same lifestyle and diet changes. And the stories go on and on and on and on and on. We have 1,500 documented case studies, right, through the work of Kelly Brogan, right, that they call radical remissions, or she calls radical remissions. And these are people who either outside of conventional medicine, didn't use any conventional medicine at all, or in adjunct to, through an integrative approach, maybe some off-label drugs, maybe some surgery and diet and lifestyle changes, maybe a little bit of chemo, for example, or some IPT, insulin potentiated therapy, which is like low-dose chemo, which actually the science tells us is 10,000 times more effective at killing the targeted cancer cells than just a shotgun approach of chemotherapy, right? And these are 1,500 case studies we have so far that are actually in her book, and I've done interviews with her, and it's actually pretty amazing work where you can again see these common principles. So we're talking principles here, right? Foundational lifestyle, diet, nutrition, principle changes. And we can't leave out thinking. We can't leave out the science of epigenetics. We can't leave out the importance of our thoughts and our emotions and the impact they have on our physiology. Bruce Lipton's a good friend and colleague of mine. He's in my documentary, talking about all the, really going into depth in the science of epigenetics and how literally our thinking can contribute to disease or help our bodies heal from that disease, right? And so when we look at that whole approach, when we look at the science that the huge that Nature came out with, that big report that said, yeah, up to 90% of cancer is diet, lifestyle, environment related. And then we look at the leading edge, kind of, still up and coming, but a lot more well accepted science of epigenetics now today. We could really, I would go on and theorize that 99+% of all cancer could be prevented or reversed following all these fundamental principles. Now, if you have stage 4 or stage N cancer, there's no guarantees, obviously, right? And there are a lot of components in there that, lifestyle changes and habit changes for people are not always easy. Compliance is not always easy, right? And so to say, look, are people going to do everything necessary that, all these others? I just interviewed another gentleman the other day, 1 year after his cancer diagnosis, following all these principles I just laid out, cancer-free again, right? So these stories keep coming up. We're learning more and more as we go. The science, I really believe, eventually will catch up. But along the way, we have to piece it together. But I think we also have to use a little bit of our own logic, our own reasoning, and even our own intuition, right? Because those things, there is value to logic and reasoning and intuition in addition to science. Without those, science doesn't have much value. But if we apply logic and reasoning and intuition to science, we can get ahead of the curve, at least from my opinion.
Got it. So let's take an example to make this really practical. Let's imagine, God forbid, that someone that you or I knew got cancer. And they came to you and they said, Nathan, everything you've interviewed so many experts on this. I've got breast cancer. What do I do? What would be your response? How would you tell that person to approach resolving their cancer?
This is not meant to be an advertisement. I would say go watch my masterclass.
Okay.
I literally have been asked that question 1,000 times. And so I produce summits and conferences and bring on the world leading experts. I've done the documentary. People can go watch the documentary to get a good feel, a good foundation. It's an hour and a half. You can learn a lot from that and be inspired, right? But that question has come up a million times. And there's no way you can answer that question in an hour interview. There's no way you can answer that question in an email when people email me. So I said, look, when people ask me this, I want to give them something that literally I would do and I would do for my family. And I do for myself and my family now every single day. Some of the things are not necessary for me to do, right? And many of the things are. And so I literally spent quite a while researching heavily and then creating a 9-module masterclass that teaches exactly that, teaches exactly everything I've learned and exactly what I would do. And so, it's 7 steps, it's 9 modules, it's probably 5 hours of content, and I could go much deeper than that, but I want to give people a foundational blueprint that they could follow. So it's called Becoming Cancer Free. They can go find it. And I'd say start there. But for sake of time and sake of obviously delivering, more value to your listeners, here's what I would tell people initially. Figure out where your biggest weakness is, right? What is your biggest weakness right now? Figure out one thing. Look at your diet. Look at your movement routines. Look at your relationships. Look at your mindset. Are you stressed all the time, right? Are you not moving your body every day, an hour a day, hour and a half a day, doing some form of exercise? It could be walking around the block. It could be, jumping on a little rebounder. It could be cycling, swimming. Look at your movement routines. Look at your diet. Are you eating a lot of processed food? Are you, getting the minimum 5 servings, the USDA's minimum 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day? My minimum that I tell cancer patients is 13 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, 8 of those being vegetables, 5 being fruits. And not to be afraid of fruits and berries, right? Because even though they have some sugar in them, they have fiber and phytonutrients and all kinds of benefits from those fruits. But 13, if you have cancer, are you getting, the minimum amount of fruits and vegetables every day? Look at your whole life and take a moment right now and say, look, where's my biggest weakness? And from that point forward, make that your priority. Make that your priority to figure out what can I do to make the biggest jump, right? To make the biggest jump. I was telling my wife earlier, she said, yeah, but my family, like, what if they, it's too expensive for them to eat organic. They live in Mexico. They're kind of off the grid a little bit. They're, they don't have any great, organic grocery stores near them. It's too expensive for them, et cetera, et cetera. So they're just not making the changes they need for their health, and they're dealing with all kinds of chronic diseases, right? I said, well, look, forget about organic for a moment. Organic is going to, let's say your health is here, organic's going to take you here, right? Get rid of those pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, GMOs, et cetera. Organic's going to take you here. But if you're here with your nutrition, right? And you're not eating enough of the protective foods that are going to protect your body against cancer and help eliminate toxins and, give you the fiber and the microfloral health and all the things you need for a strong immune system. Then what you need to do, organic or not, is go up to that 5, 8, 13 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. And that jump alone, even if it's conventional, will take you here. That's a huge jump for your health for people who are not eating that. And I can guarantee you, most people I talk to today are not eating more than 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. Because I ask people and they say, I can't, it's too many. And it's actually really easy. I'll show you a picture here in a second if you want. I can show everybody tuning in if they're watching this. But then, okay, so you're already doing that. What's the next thing? Well, organic will take you a little bit higher. So my point is, figure out your biggest hole, your biggest weakness. Learn more about what you can do to optimize that part of your life and your health, and then dive into that and make the biggest change there possible, right? Diet, exercise, mindset. You're stressed all the time. You're not meditating. You're not taking care of yourself. You're anxious. You're watching the news every day. You live in fear. Well, guess what? Half-hour meditation in the morning, half-hour meditation at night is going to do you wonders. It's going to relax your nervous system. It's going to upregulate your parasympathetic system. It's going to upregulate your immune system. It's going to give you that fighting chance that your body needs to thrive. All right, you've been doing that a few weeks. You're doing great. You've made some big changes there. Now you go on to the next, right? Often we think, I got to do everything. I got to change everything. Otherwise, I'm going to die. It's not going to work. But it's too much, so I don't do anything. So you figure out that one thing, you make the change, and then you go on from there.
Got it. So just for clarity, I don't want you to get accused or attacked by people in the conventional medicine arena. So what everything that you just said, would you put that in the context of this is a supplementary therapy that you should do alongside your conventional therapy, or this should be in place of it? I don't think you're saying that. Or this should be, hey, regardless of, you should go seek a conventional oncologist, get their opinion on your cancer. Maybe they'll have an effective treatment, maybe they won't. Either way, regardless of what they've got available, you should do all the stuff that you just recommended.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of research that's already come out that has shown all of these diet lifestyle changes actually support the effectiveness of treatments like chemotherapy, right? Just fasting for 24 hours, for example, before chemotherapy not only increases its effectiveness. I don't have the study in front of me. We could pull it up, but not only increases its effectiveness, but also increases your body to reproduce and regenerate healthy cells after the treatment. So all of these things, for sure, from my opinion, should definitely be done. If you're doing traditional, conventional treatment, not traditional, traditional is indigenous medicine. Let's get the terminology right. If you're doing conventional treatment, right, modern medicine, all of these things, for the most part, and you got to do a little more research and maybe get some guidance there, but for the most part, will only support your health and healing, right? Now, I talk to a lot of people who have reversed cancer without conventional treatment. So I'm not telling people get conventional treatment, don't get conventional treatment. That's not my role. My role is to educate you, empower you, give you as much information as I can, right? So that you can go to your oncologist. I have a 12-question checklist of questions that you should ask your oncologist or your functional medicine practitioner or your integrative medical doctor or your naturopathic doctor. Questions you should ask them that will empower you as the patient. I love Dr. Nalini Chilkov. One of the things that she talks about is she's working with cancer patients, and she works with a lot of medical doctors and oncologists, helping to bridge this gap together between nutrition and diet and natural therapies with conventional medicine. She helps bridge that and brings the science and the research to the medical doctors so that they can empower their patients. And one of the things that she says is, look, you have to be willing to look at the whole picture and not rush into anything. The problem today with our modern medical approach is that you come back, you have a PET scan or whatever your diagnosis, however it came back, and they say, look, you have cancer. We need to do treatment immediately. You got 3 months left to live. You got 6 months left to live. We're going to schedule you next week for surgery. We're going to schedule you next week for chemotherapy, radiation. And the person in that chair sitting there is so afraid. They don't know anything about anything. And so they just jump into it and say, yes, okay. And they don't do any research, and they're, and so they just follow along, whether that treatment protocol is known to be highly effective or not. And the medical doctor is just going to give them the tool bag that they have, the tools in their tool bag. They're going to say, here's what I know, here's what you should do. And so, what I encourage people to do is take a moment, say, thank you very much, doctor. I'm going to consider this. I will get back to you. And then go and do some consulting with an integrative medical doctor or a functional medicine practitioner or a naturopath that has a specialty in cancer, for example, and get as much information as you can before you dive into any treatment protocol, natural or conventional, because it could be, wow, you just need a little surgery and then clean up your diet and you're good to go. Like that would be great for some people. Unfortunately, for most people, the cancer comes so late because it takes years and years to turn into to grow to the size of a tumor. For example, it can take 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Some people have cancer for 20 years and have no idea, and they find it accidentally on a routine checkup or because they've been having gut issues from something else, and then they find it on the scan, right? And so so you've spent years and years and years making cancer in your body. Let's get that straight. We don't get cancer. We make cancer from the inside out. We don't catch it. It's not a disease that we catch from the outside in. We make it from the cells, basically healthy cellular respiration breaking down in a chronic fermentative state, and, DNA damage and so forth. Cancer is made. So learn, how do I stop making cancer in my body? And there are some points, like I said, conventional treatments can be supportive. So I'm not here to tell people to do one or the other. I'm saying educate yourself before you do anything. And then you have to go inside a little bit and trust yourself and trust your own, what I would say, inner guidance to find the healing path that's right for you.
Mm-hmm. If you could give one, I guess two, let me ask for two pieces of advice. One would be for anybody that has recently been diagnosed with cancer or currently has cancer. What would be one thing that you would tell that person? And to somebody who has not had cancer, doesn't have cancer, and is trying to do their best to avoid it, what would you tell that person?
Yeah, beautiful. Someone who's just been newly diagnosed with cancer or has cancer, I would say, um, cancer is a normal biological process. We all have cancer cells inside of us. It's not the boogeyman. We don't have to cut it and radiate it and burn it and attack it and kill it and be so afraid of it. It's a natural process that happens inside of us when DNA gets damaged and cells, start to change form. Dr. Thomas Lodi said it best in my documentary. He said, there is a cure for cancer. It's called the immune system. And when you have a fully functioning immune system, you likely will never have a cancer diagnosis. So, one thing is, you have time, right? I mean, for 99.9% of cancer patients, you have time. Most people were not told, most people tuning in right now, there could be somebody, I could be wrong, but most people tuning in right now have not been told, we got to get this out of your brainstem right now, or you're dead in 48 hours. Because they wouldn't be listening to this if they were told that, right? That cancer's been forming for years and years and years. So you have time. You don't have to rush into anything right now. You can take days, weeks, potentially months, right? I mean, you don't want to wait years, but you have some time to get more, to look at more research, to interview other experts in different fields, to watch my documentary, attend the masterclass, do whatever you want to do to educate yourself. But you have time. You can take a deep breath. You can, relax for a moment and say, okay, let me learn as much as I can about what this is and what causes it and what I can do about it before I make any major life altering decisions. We know if you start adding, a glass of fresh green vegetable juice to your diet right now, every single day, 99.99999% sure that's going to give you some benefit. So you could do that while you're researching. And we know that sleeping, a good solid 8 hours every night. The research shows us 7 to 9 hours, right? Sleeping, as you get into deep sleep and you enter autophagy and, cellular cleanup and you get rid of those waste cells and, reutilize the amino acids and effectively terminate and remove cancer cells. We know sleep has such a healing effect. All right, I could focus on my sleep, getting better, deeper quality sleep, and I could start having green juice every day, just vegetable juice, right? Those are things you could do that would empower you to, like, okay, I'm doing something positive while I'm researching, while I'm learning, while I'm getting multiple opinions before you make any life altering decisions. The thing that I absolutely do not agree with, and people can hate me all, medical doctors can hate me all they want, which is if someone has a BRCA1 gene, a woman she's in her 30s, she has BRCA1 gene, and they say, look, you have BRCA1 gene, the best thing you can do to not get cancer, you don't have cancer right now, best thing you can do is we'll cut both your breasts off. That's the solution. And I see women being pushed through fear into that. Well, 50% of women with the BRCA1 gene never get cancer, right? And so, and if you're not even diagnosed with cancer yet, look at all the preventative things you can do: diet,
They
lifestyle,
told me that
nutrition,
they told
meditation.
me they told me I had the gene for penile cancer and for brain
Oh,
cancer, and they wanted
oh,
to
dear
remove
God.
both my brain and my penis. And I thanked them for their offer, and I moved on to another doctor.
Well, I'm glad you did, because you're a blessing to humanity and society. So I'm glad you didn't fall, and you have two beautiful children, I heard, right? So so I'm glad you didn't follow that advice. But
And I say that just for clarity. I to everyone listening, I say it completely jokingly. That
I
didn't
know,
happen,
I
but
know.
it's meant to point out the stupidity of an approach where you look at these genes that are linked with cancer. There's a lot of distorted thinking around that, where people think, oh, I have the gene for so and so cancer, that means I'm going to get this cancer. And it doesn't mean that at all. These are still almost always predominantly nutrition and lifestyle driven cancers. Um, and having a particular disease for it uh, may increase your susceptibility relative to someone else, but that doesn't mean you're going to get it. So I'll give you an example. I have genes that are strongly implicated as quote unquote the obesity genes, right? I'm not obese. Why am I not obese if I have the obesity genes, right? And why am I not worried about becoming obese? Because I have my nutrition and lifestyle habits dialed in. So my comment earlier was just to point out the stupidity that just because you have a gene that says you have an increased risk of whatever type of cancer doesn't mean you go start cutting out your intestines and your brain and your penis and whatever other organ on your body because you have slightly increased susceptibility to so and so cancer relative to someone else.
And it's so sad. I mean, I see people. I saw a woman the other day in her 30s, a really well respected person in the fitness industry, right? Who, I think she's in her 30s, who just had a double mastectomy, not because she had cancer, but because she had the gene,
Yeah,
and the doctor
that's
convinced her
totally
to cut
insane.
her breast off, right? So, as you
That,
said,
that's
it's not.
a doctor who's doing that is honestly that's criminal.
I think so too, and I think that's why it's so important this information gets out to as many people as possible, so that as you learn more and more, this is, yeah, we've talked here for a while now, and I think people have some takeaways. But I've spent 8 years so far on this, and thousands of hours of research and hundreds of interviews, and I'm still learning. I'm not saying anybody has to put that much time in, but put some time in to continuing to learn and learn what are those causes we talked about and what are contributing, and then what you can do. So we're talking about prevention. So many of the things that we know can contribute to the body healing itself from cancer are the same things that contribute to the body preventing cancer in the first place,
Mhm.
right? So those are the commonalities are so similar that I would recommend you basically do a lot of the same things. Now, if you don't have cancer, you don't need surgery. If you don't have cancer, you don't need IPT, insulin potentiated therapy, for prevention. You don't need chemotherapy if you don't have cancer, right? So there are some differences there, obviously, in terms of therapies. Also, high dose vitamin C intravenously, 200 to 100 grams a day have shown incredible anti-cancer properties with cancer patients. But if you're trying to prevent cancer or any chronic metabolic lifestyle related disease, for that matter, you don't need 20 grams of vitamin C a day. In fact, that would probably be way too much for you. You might take 300 milligrams or 500 milligrams, right? You might take, so, without getting too much into supplements and so forth, there are maintenance protocols for health and healing, and there are therapeutic protocols for health and healing. When you get to therapeutic, you have to be mindful, know what you're doing, and get proper advice from people who know what they're doing, because you can certainly overdo it as well, right? So I would leave people with that. I would leave people with this thought as well. Greg Braden said it in my documentary, and it's always stuck with me. He said, there are really two. We could look at two primary reasons why most people get cancer. The first is people are getting too much of what they don't need, or people are not getting enough of what they do need. So you're either getting too much of what you don't need or not enough of what you do need, and most of the time it's both. And in these two camps, you could say, toxic burden, toxic overload, too much toxic exposure, infections in the intestines or in the gut, ongoing chronic infections, we know lead to inflammation. We know chronic inflammation leads to cancer, right? So cleaning out the parasites, cleaning out the gut, cleaning out the fungus, cleaning out the things that lead to chronic inflammation, cleaning out the toxins from the body, from the water, the food, the air. Okay, reduced toxic exposure is going to help you with all kinds of health challenges. And two, nutritional deficiencies, or the reverse of that is nutritional adequacy, or Dr. Joel Fuhrman teaches nutritional excellence, right? Is so many people actually, I saw some interesting science a while back that was actually saying that looked at most people who actually die from, quote unquote, have died from cancer, right? That's on their death certificate. And actually, if you look at people who have cancer and the top reasons why they actually die, what causes their death, is actually not cancer. That's usually not the number one morbidity factor. What it usually is I mean, I won't say this, but nutritional deficiencies. But heart disease is a big one, right? And then infections. Most people from cancer with cancer actually die from infections, because the immune system is so weakened from not really just the cancer, but the diet and lifestyle, and then the treatments, that they end up dying from a basic infection, a staph infection, or a bacterial infection or something like that. So a lot of times it's not really the cancer you have to worry about, it's the other associated risk factors for that cancer, that like lack of nutrition, not having enough amino acids and vitamins and minerals in your diet. We focus way too much energy on macronutrients, right? Protein, carbohydrates, fat, and definitely not enough on micronutrients, which actually have the biggest impact on cellular repair and cellular regeneration. We didn't have time to get into time restricted eating and fasting and hormetic stressors and all that stuff, which is so fascinating and so helpful for cancer. But I would leave it there. Is those two primary focuses of getting rid of the things that are causing toxicity in the body, and introducing more of the things that lead to nutritional adequacy and nutritional excellence in the body.
Awesome. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was fun and excellent job. Where would you like to send people? Where can people learn more about your work or your films?
Yeah, thanks, Ari. I mean, I appreciate being here, man. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I mean, I just have to say, I really love the work that you do. I think, the fact that you bring so much science into the work you do, and then help it, be understandable for people, is very respectable. So thanks for having me. And I would encourage people, my documentary just came out online. We did a film festival circuit. We did internal screenings, and now it's actually available to the public basically anywhere in the world. You can rent it for a couple of bucks, or you can get the DVD. But it's won 20 awards. It's my distribution company just released it just recently, so you can go watch the film. I'd highly encourage people to go watch the film, because it'll give you a lot more that actually we didn't have time to cover in this interview. So that website is just theintegrativeperspective.com. theintegrativeperspective.com.
Awesome. Nathan, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on the show. I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, my honor. Thank you.
Hey there, this is Ari again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you found it valuable, please share it with your friends, share it with your family, help me get the word out there. Also, if you're on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell to get notifications every time we release a new video or new episode of the podcast. And if you're listening to this, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for supporting my work at the Energy Blueprint. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will see you in the next